Philippines, at the crossroads of change. One of the fastest growing economies in Asia.
We project the economy to grow between 6.5 and 7.5% in 2017.
Strong domestic consumption, low inflation, cushioning an uncertain global market. But remittance growth is slowing. The peso and stock market under pressure. Geopolitical tensions occupy the headlines. Can the resilient economy continue its surge under the new political leadership?
We plan to spend massively on infrastructure. This administration must now focus on economic growth that significantly reduces poverty and inequality.
Can the country and business sector engineer a long-term boom? This is CNBC Managing Asia's special event on the Philippines, Shaping the Future. Joining us on our distinguished panel, Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala, Chairman and CEO of Ayala Corporation. Hans Sika, President and CEO of the Philippine Stock Exchange. And our host, Christine Tan.
Welcome to Managing Asia's special event on the Philippines, Shaping the Future. Thank you so much for being with us today. Gentlemen, gotta ask you, the Philippines is expected to grow more than 6% this year. The ADB and IMF says the Philippine economy is resilient. Outlook remains favorable despite external headwinds. As influential businessman in this country, do you firmly believe the Philippines is resilient enough to withstand any global volatility? Hans?
I would think so. In fact, we're quite bullish on the economy. I'm quite delighted, in fact, that the multilateral agencies upgraded their view on what's happening. We think that the macro fundamentals are solid. And even the recent, let's call it, hike in inflation rate, we hope is not going to be too much of an issue. The fact that the rating agencies have reiterated the investment grade rating, I think, also gives us comfort that the trend lines are correct, as well as I would say also the pronouncements of the economic team are highly reassuring to the business community. So we're looking forward to a fast growth, not just 2016, but hopefully in the coming years to come.
Jaime, you bullish?
Very much so. Actually, I will support Hans on this issue. I think we've had a very strong consumer demand growth story for some time. Resiliency doesn't just depend on that. We've had a low inflation environment for some time now, a low interest rate environment, and an environment that's been conducive to people to put capital to work. Many countries in the world are looking for consumer demand, and we've been lucky to have it not just for a year or two, but we've been lucky to have it now for 5 years, actually through to a decade.
So domestic consumption needs to grow. Investments need to come in to generate jobs, to generate employment. The previous administration has been able to attract FDI flows. If you look at official figures for last year, more than $5 billion. But that's still pretty small compared to what Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia is attracting, more than $10 billion. Do you think the Philippines can catch up when it comes to FDI?
Well, we hope so. I think the issue for the Philippines is one of structural change that's required, especially when you take a look at the FDI equation. And when I talk about structural change, this also has to do with, I guess, reducing the constraints in the economy, including reducing perhaps the limits on foreign equity participation. Now, clearly that's already been loosened up in some industries. It's heartening to hear the current government basically say they're going to push for relaxing more of those constraints. So that's kind of like, I would say, a #1 priority in terms of changing the discussion on FDI coming into the Philippines.
When it comes to FDI, it involves lifting sacred constitutional restrictions. It's happened in the past. Attempts have been made, but nothing has happened. Do you think the current Duterte administration can pull it off?
I think President Duterte's government has a strong, determined bloc in our Congress and Senate. And so if that is his wish and that is his economic managers wish, I think there's a good chance that this will happen, and I believe it will be applauded by the business community. But just following up on a statement you made earlier, I agree that FDI is an important component, but one has to look at the deployment of capital as a whole. FDI is by definition foreign direct investment.
Sure.
I think what we've also seen in the Philippines is deployment of local capital in numbers that we have not seen in a long time. There was a period 10, 20 years ago when local companies would not be involved in infrastructure projects.
But now things are changing?
But now our balance sheets are stronger, and there are a number, 5, 6, 7 local companies bidding for projects fairly aggressively. I think that must be also taken into account. FDI is one set of flows of capital being put to work, but the local community, the liquidity that our country has produced has been deployed in aggressive ways into the country.
The Philippine economy is gaining traction. We're getting a promising new political leadership. Change is expected. But at the same time, we are getting all these explosive headlines coming out of the Philippines. As CEOs running businesses here in the Philippines, how do you react to the way the Philippines is being perceived right now? Hans?
Well, first of all, we get that question about what's happening in the stock market, and clearly there are daily...
Investors are pulling out.
Daily volatility, right? So it goes up and down, and clearly certain things can get ascribed to perhaps political statements. We always say that there are probably more technical reasons for pullouts or money coming back in as opposed to direct causation. So we're a bit careful in terms of making.
But are you worried about the recent sell-off in the stock market?
Not yet, mainly for the reason that liquidity on the stock market has been increasing through this year. So the recent sell-off is probably a reflection of what's happening outside, wherein there were threats of the U.S. Federal Reserve increasing rates, so that increased volatility. There's a lot of pull-out at that point in time. Before OPEC actually agreed on the oil, let's call it, supply situation, that actually riled markets even more. And I think that if you take a look at it, there's been a net inflow a few days after that. So I think what we probably will worry about in the future is that if money's gone out and you have a lot of noise, it probably is a little bit more difficult to attract that same money coming in an easy format. Now,
so are you bracing for more volatility? Have we seen the worst?
Well, we think that there will be continued volatility through the end of the year, simply because the U.S. Fed is expected to increase rates. And I think behavior of global markets have been a very strong driver of, by the way, not just Philippines, but emerging market, let's call it exchanges volatility as well. But to one point that the time was alluding to, one of the interesting things at least in the Philippine market, is that with the increase of, let's call it, the pie and volumes, what we're seeing is actually a 50-50 foreign local, let's call it, share in trading on the local market. So what does that tell you? That probably tells you that as some people are taking the opposite view, willing to sell, there's maybe enough local liquidity to pick up the slack. So, and the mere fact that the pie is growing.
So confidence is there?
I would argue that confidence is there. And I think the local bid, if I may call it that, is quite confident that, let's call it, short-term volatility is probably something that can be managed.
Jaime, you yourself have been vocal. For investments to come into this country, you need a peaceful, predictable political environment. Are you concerned about the current situation we're seeing, especially all this anti-U.S. rhetoric we've been hearing?
Well, maybe let me give you an alternative point of view. It was substantiated by a meeting I had yesterday with a foreign investor. Our stock market has done, quite well for the last decade. If you really measure the growth in our stock market, it's been great. But there are many who argue that perhaps at a certain point in time, as happens with these swings, things get a little bit valued richly, or perhaps some would argue overvalued.
So you're saying it's a correction?
Well, no. What I'm saying is that some of the biggest investments that the Ayala Group has made is precisely in very volatile conditions. Stock markets, by their very nature, and the capitalist model by its very nature, is volatile. We've seen that through trends in short periods of time, long periods of time. When there are corrections, it's actually a great opportunity to buy. I think that has to be the mindset. And I think with the kind of volatility we're seeing, it's actually a great time for opportunities.
The Standard & Poor's has come out to say that predictability of policy making has diminished under the Duterte administration. Do both of you feel the same way? Is the economic reform agenda still on track?
I would argue that it still is. The thing is, while we have maybe headline risk and headline news, what hasn't changed, as far as I can tell, is the plans and the direction that the economic team is taking. So from that point of view, nothing has changed.
Yeah, I would support that. I think both Secretary Pernia and Secretary Dominguez, both working hand in hand, have been quite consistent in their messaging, and they're moving to execution fairly rapidly. What I mean by that, one thing is words and the other thing is action. If you look at Secretary Dominguez, I think the president's using the capital he has in our Congress and Senate to start moving quite aggressively on the tax reform plans that he stated he would move on. I've never seen it move so fast. Right now in Congress, there are a couple of bills to bring corporate tax down and individual tax rates down to a new level as promised by the administration. That's currently ongoing. In Secretary Pernia's case, he had the 10-point agenda, but I was congratulating him just a couple of minutes ago. He got, I think, 7 to 9 projects through the NEDA board in quick succession, roughly.
You've been monitoring.
Well, has to, right? Because you always look for execution. And that's about 170 billion pesos worth of projects coming online relatively quickly and approved by the NEDA board. That's great. That is execution after talk.
What you're saying, you're confident. Is that feeling widespread among the local business community here in the Philippines? Are they feeling the same way on the ground?
I would think so. And again, maybe the proof of the pudding obviously will be what we see by the end of next quarter, or this quarter and next quarter, right? Our investments continuing in, for example, these infrastructure projects. It's actually going to be a good benchmark for us.
Well, after he was elected president, Duterte actually called more than 400 business people to submit a wish list. Hans, Jaime, did you submit your own wish list? What did you ask for?
Yeah, I was down actually at the conference that was hosted by the president and his economic team. It was a great dialogue. It happened very early on, even I think before he took office. It was welcomed. On my end, I've been a great believer that we're behind as a country on the infrastructure space, the hard infrastructure, and that's one element that I encourage.
Did you ask for a big cut in corporate income tax?
I think tax reform has always been a concern. I've always felt that our tax rates from a corporate point of view are above ASEAN levels. And I'm a great believer that if a country is to remain competitive, our tax rates have to be equal or similar.
Do you think tax rates will come down under President Duterte?
Oh, very much so. I do believe that those have already been put in place. I think he's addressing inequality issues on the personal side. He's raised, at least his bill proposal, raises taxes at the high end of the income scale and lowers it at the lower. I think that's a fair way of beginning to adjust the inequality equation. On the corporate side, Secretary Dominguez has said he intends to bring it down, and I think they're moving that bill through Congress. I think it'll happen, and it'll make us more competitive as a country compared
to the region. What corporate tax rate would you like?
I think the regional, we believe that some taxes, of course, are needed to be able to build out the infrastructure and provide the social benefits that a country needs, and this is a country that obviously needs a number of social benefits. So tax rates have to be there, but I'm a great believer that it has to be competitive with the region. The region currently, on average, is at about a 20% tax rate. We've been at 35 in the Philippines. Anything that brings it down closer to 20, I think, puts us in a competitive position.
And you're positive that's going to happen?
I think so, yes. I think it's been stated, and the bill is currently in Congress. As far as I can see it, I believe it'll happen.
Hans, on the stock market side, did you submit a wish list to the president?
No, we were also there. I think what was interesting was the items that we were asking for actually included tax reform. We were also focused on some capital market reform, which is not going to come in this initial part of the, let's call it the finance secretary's agenda. Clearly, taxation reform is the topmost item. We're probably in the third or fourth layer. But we do hope that comes. And maybe on the side, we've talked about other financial products that we hope can be launched sooner rather than later in this term.
Infrastructure spending is big on President Duterte's agenda. You're focusing a lot on infrastructure business this way. What are you eyeing? Are you going all out for these infrastructure projects?
Well, a lot of it depends on the framework. We don't bid for everything. exciting. I think what has happened under the last two administrations is that frameworks are being created, and frameworks that we're comfortable with, where the public sector creates a framework for the private sector to participate and measure, I guess, the risk-reward return to both the people who put capital forward and the consuming public who will receive the services. That equation, I think, has been nicely measured in the last administration. So a number of us bid on projects. We're heartened that this administration is looking at, for example, putting the NAIA airport to bidding with the private sector. We ourselves would like to participate in that. The terms are not yet clear, but certainly we have a consortium ready to participate in that bidding if it were to happen. I believe even though things are going well, there is always challenges that we will face, and one has to keep the eye on the ball on the future. Employment generation is a vital need. President Duterte has pointed out that bringing down inequality is a primary concern, and a number of the policies are addressing that, but nothing contributes to lessening inequality than employment generation. All of us in the private sector have a role to play, and we have to set our eye on the future to really continue working on the policies that encourage employment.
So what are you doing to generate employment?
Well,
what are you doing to create jobs within Ayala?
Well, putting capital to work in a variety of industries. We're entering whole new areas in education and healthcare. We're moving into the manufacturing sector in a much bigger way than we have in the past. All these generate employment, or at the very least, help bridge the link between education and employment. We're very committed to that sector. But as a country, we've been growing at a great rate, 6%, 7%. I think that should be applauded. It's among the highest in Asia. But I would aspire to even more. So if you can grow at 8%, for example, then you start a virtuous cycle.
You think the Philippine economy can grow to 8%?
Well, if right now consumer demand alone is taking us to that level, if you add a strong FDI component, and I put this forward as a challenge.
It will overtake China.
No. You wouldn't. Well, you would overtake China year by year. I would be concerned about taking our per capita income, which is at about $3,000 per person. It would be nice to reach, for example, at the very least 12,000, which would put you, say, in the league of Malaysia. But to do that, you have to grow at 8% a year. As a country, we're over 100 million people. I believe we're in a great cycle of growth. It's consumer-driven, but if we can add a strong investment-led component, both local and foreign, to that equation, we can at least slide up to the 8% growth. And that is something that begins to take us out of a negative cycle of remaining on the same per capita income and start to move up to the levels of some of our more successful. That takes a lot of concerted action, both by the government and the private sector working in unison.
Don't go away. Up next.
President Duterte has made it quite clear that corruption is something he will not condone and will fight actively against. We've seen how determined he can be when he wants to fight something.
Managing Asia will be right back.
Excuse me, what do you think you'd pay for this smartphone?
A few hundred.
That's top of the line, more like $425.
More like $9.
What? That's not possible.
It is on DealDash.com. See, DealDash.com is the fair and honest bidding site. This top-of-the-line laptop went for around $40.
That can't be.
Incredible.
I know. Everyone says it's too good to be true.
But it's true. DealDash.com gets people real savings every day, big savings. And if you're not satisfied, you get your money back. On DealDash.com, professional cameras sell for as low as $15. $50 gift cards go for $20. Laptops can be had for less than $10. And shipping is always free. It's perfect for gifts or just everyday necessities. Visit DealDash.com today and start bidding.
Is this from Deal Dash?
Uh-huh.
How much?
You don't want to know.
The pageantry of Hockey Night in Canada makes it special. And I think that's the most exciting is it's the future.
Toronto proud to announce Austin Matthews.
Would like to select Connor McDavid.
When you're getting ready for your first Hockey Night in Canada game, it's a big deal. And you want to perform well on the biggest stage. And that's the biggest opportunity on Saturday night. This is Hockey Night.
Monitor what's happening when you're not around. Secure and protect your home with Rogers Smart Home Monitoring. Plans start at only $19.99 per month. Call 1-888-ROGERS-1 today.
Hey, Mr. J.
Hey, Maddie.
What's up?
I'm just talking to Rogers on Facebook Messenger, upgrading our TV package.
Wait, you're on Facebook?
Yep. You might want to rethink that profile picture.
Get help on Facebook Messenger. It's the new way from Rogers.
On your Android phone or tablet.
What can you tell us, Jaime, about the level of corruption in this country? Are things under control? Is governance improving?
I believe we've come a long way in terms of governance as a country. In the last administration, I think we re-rated ourselves to a whole different level. And I think President Duterte has made it quite clear that corruption is something he will not condone and will fight actively against. We've seen how determined he can be when he wants to fight something. So I think that he will put his eye on corruption and grind it to a halt where he can. We're a big country. We're not perfect in many ways. Our foundations are still weak on many institutions. So this is a long-term battle. But certainly, I think as a country over the last decade, leading into this administration and under the current regime, corruption remains an issue that they want to fight and fight hard against. And I think that has re-rated us as a country and has led to the kind of credit rating upgrades that we've had. I think that all has to do with the credibility we have bought ourselves as a country.
Hans, what are your feelings?
I think the signaling from the government is also very good in this regard. On the corporate sector, we've had a number of initiatives, and I think in terms of trying to raise corporate governance and corporate governance disclosures. So I think we've gone a long way, say, from 10 years ago to today, even on that particular facet. And this might not seem to be a very important thing in when you look at the country, but I think that corporate governance and improving standards of behavior, improving disclosure standards are actually a very good way of trying to not just signal what's happening in the whole country, but I think it actually signals the leadership in terms of maybe moving us to a higher bar in terms of how we behave. And I think hopefully looking at ASEAN as a whole, the attempt is to try and bring us to not just reporting standards, but actually behavioral standards in the corporate sector that are at par with ASEAN.
What about red tape and bureaucracy? How big a problem is that still in the Philippines?
I think it's still an issue. I think it's still recognized as a problem. I think one of the 10-point agendas was precisely to bring bureaucracy down. I think Davao, under President Duterte, attracted a great deal of capital. We ourselves have been investors in Davao City for many, many years now. I think they want to bring some of those formulas to work, and a lot of it is about bringing down the bureaucracy.
What are your recommendations? How actually do you cut down red tape and bureaucracy?
Well, I think, by the way, the effort of the government to actually even reduce their size is one way of reducing red tape, because there is a lot of duplication in many
This duplication
processes.
also means taking away jobs, isn't it?
Well, it does. Well, if you assume that the government is perhaps the largest employer, but the flip side of that is that you want people employed in other sectors which are probably just as, or even more productive, I would argue. And I think that the mere fact that there's a lot of growth in other sectors in this economy means that there are probably a lot more job opportunities outside of being a government bureaucrat.
Don't go away. Up next,
infrastructure build, funding coming from the AIIB. There's going to be a net positive.
So as a country, how closely are you watching the U.S. elections? Managing Asia, we'll be right back.
People who have been diagnosed with mesothelioma have many questions. How did I get this disease? What are my treatment options? How will this affect my loved ones? You need answers, which is why we offer a free book written by medical professionals who have treated mesothelioma.
Call toll-free at 1-800-700-0850 or go to mesoonly.com.
There's no obligation, so call toll-free at 1-800-700-0850.
Do you see China play a bigger role in the Philippine economy, Hans?
I think so. Probably the most immediate role is with all this infrastructure build, funding coming from the AIIB. There's going to be a net positive, as well as a complementary funding source for all these projects. Clearly, the amount of, I guess, projects that can be built in the Philippines, when you look at all the initiatives, it means that you'll need not just local funding sources, but truly a plethora of, or a wide menu of funding options, including, I would say, AIIB.
So as a country, how closely are you watching the U.S. elections? What happens if Donald Trump comes in as president? Hans?
Well, first of all, when we get asked this question, we tend to focus on it could probably affect could it affect the BPO industry? Could it affect foreign overseas workers' flows? We don't think so. BPO industry, as Jaime mentioned earlier, is a fast-growing and resilient industry. And at the end of the day, even though views on outsourcing and sending jobs overseas might be a topic. By the way, this topic always happens every U.S. election. And I think what we've seen in the BPO industry is that it continues to go from strength to strength and growing. And if you believe the numbers, that I guess by somewhere in 2017, BPO revenues will actually eclipse the amount of funds being sent back by OFWs. That's actually a good trend. So these two factors are I think, going to continue to be the pillars of the economy.
Yeah. Personally, I believe that obviously, living abroad, we don't see the characters that closely. All I can say is that Hillary Clinton, when she was Foreign Secretary of the United States, was very visible in Asia. She's also visited the Philippines a number of times. I think a win on her part would certainly put a renewed focus on our country as part of their global strategy, and I think a focus on ASEAN. And I think, of course, that would be a good thing.
What are you not saying?
I'm only focusing on the one that I've seen at work. I think a Trump presidency would obviously be far more unpredictable and would be a little bit trickier for a country like ours that relies a lot on service agreements between our country and the U.S.
And finally, what difference do both of you want to make to your country, Hans?
Well,
what impact do you want to make?
We hope that over time, and in my role in the exchange, is that we can provide positive change by actually making the market grow larger and we become more inclusive. It's not just, for example, saving and investment in the exchange, not just viewed for institutional funds, but rather for the everyday man on the street. And I think if we get to that point, we'll have done a reasonably good job.
It would make me happy to remain a progressive element and a relevant element in our society. And that would mean basically taking our products and services and taking them down to low-income groups and making them as relevant to those groups as it would to a higher income group. This administration has stated inequality is an issue. It's a global cry. It's important for the private sector to address the needs of all income groups and not just groups at the top. We're certainly taking great strides in that, and if we want to remain relevant as a corporation, we must be relevant to that new segment.
Gentlemen, appreciate your insights. This conversation cannot be more timely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for being with me today.
It's never a good feeling when you run out of something you need. So imagine if you ran out of retirement money. That's why you should go to personalcapital.com now for a retirement planner that takes the guesswork out of retirement. Plus a dashboard that shows you all your accounts in one place, even your net worth, all in real time. You'll get all these free tools to help you grow your money faster. Join for free at personalcapital.com. Find out how much you need to retire and let us help you get there.
Tired of food getting stuck to your pan? Sick of scraping and scrubbing? And when your meal won't fit, you just want to quit? Well, I've got the solution. Hi, Kathy Mitchell here with my new red copper square dance pan. This is not your grandmother's old griddle. No scratches equals no sticking. Everything dances right off. The square design means you can fit more bacon or more burgers perfectly. And the high sides prevent grease from spilling out. Non-stick and no scratches. Try this. Dump in tater tots, then add cheese, any breakfast meat, and cover with eggs. Top it with biscuits and pop it in the oven. Yes, it's oven safe up to 500 degrees. And look, everything you want for breakfast and no extra pans to clean. Even make 16 sliders at once. You can't do that in a round pan. Infused with pure copper and thanks to anti-scratch technology, it resists the toughest punishment. Swirl cheesecake into brownie mix with a metal fork and create this delicious dessert. Even a bacon crust Hawaiian pecan slides right out. Love pancakes? Here's a trick. Drop a little water in the pan. When it dances, you know it's hot and ready to cook. Like these ooey gooey chocolate chip pancakes. No sticking ever. Square Dance works on any stovetop, even induction. Got leftovers? Use tortillas. Add meat, beans, and cheese. Fold like this. Top with lettuce, tomatoes, sour cream, and salsa. Salsa? Try my Square Dance pan and you'll be dancing all day. Plus, it's dishwasher safe. Similar griddles have lower sides and can cost $70. But call now and get my red copper square dance pan for just $19.99. Plus, get my quick meals and desserts recipe book free. If red copper ever fails, we'll replace it, guaranteed. But wait, you can double the offer and receive a second set. Just pay a separate fee. That's 2 red copper square dance pans. An incredible value. Call now.
Call 1-800-296-2031 to get your square dance pan. Call now or go to squaredancepan.com. So call 1-800-296-2031. That's 1-800-296-2031. Order now.